The clinking of glasses echoed through the grand banquet hall, the warm glow of golden lights spilling across a sea of smiling faces. My parents sat at the head table, their hands clasped, their 50 years of marriage celebrated by 120 guests. My mother stood slowly, her posture graceful, her jeweled bracelet catching the light as she raised her wine glass. Her voice carried easily over the soft background music. "To 50 years of love," she began, "to a life built together, and to the family we created." I watched her smile at my younger brother, Michael, the pride in her eyes impossible to miss. Then her gaze shifted to me. "And to the daughter," she said, her tone sweet but sharp enough to cut, "who never deserved to be born." The sound of the band tuning up in the corner stopped. Conversations froze. I felt the air in the room thicken as a wave of shock rippled through the crowd. Some guests glanced at me. Others looked down at their plates as if avoiding the scene would erase it. I forced a calm smile, my pulse thundering in my ears. I stood, pushed my chair back, and reached for my glass. My eyes stayed locked on hers. "One sentence," I said in a steady voice, and she dropped her wine glass. The glass shattered on the marble floor, the sound ringing louder than any toast. 10 minutes later, 34 people walked out of that banquet hall with me. The morning of my parents' 50th anniversary celebration began like any other family event, with my mother making it clear she did not need my help and me showing up early anyway. I pulled into the country club parking lot just after 9, the September air crisp enough to see my breath. The building loomed ahead, its white columns and polished brass doors promising elegance. Inside, staff bustled around the ballroom, draping gold fabric along the walls and setting crystal centerpieces that caught the sunlight streaming in from tall windows. I'd volunteered to help with the table settings, knowing it would save the planners a few hours. My father greeted me near the entrance, his familiar smile softening the lines in his face. "Claire, you're a lifesaver," he said, kissing my cheek. "Your mother will appreciate this." We both knew that was not true, but I returned his smile anyway. My father had spent his life smoothing over her sharp edges, pretending they were quirks instead of knives. I moved through the room, placing name cards at each table. The long head table faced the guests, with 2 glittering chairs at the center for my parents. To the right of my mother's seat was my brother Michael's, and to the left was mine. The placement had been deliberate. Close enough for a good photograph, close enough for her to keep me under her watchful, critical eye. When I was 16, she had thrown me out for staying out past curfew twice in 1 week. I had slept on a friend's couch for nearly a month before my father convinced her to let me back. That pattern, her cutting me down, me finding my footing somewhere else, and my father coaxing a truce, had repeated for years. By now, I had learned to keep my voice even and my presence small around her. Around noon, the caterers arrived with trays of roasted vegetables, prime rib, and delicate pastries shaped like roses. I helped arrange them on the buffet table. My brother walked in wearing an expensive navy suit and the smug expression he had perfected since childhood. He wrapped me in a brief hug, his cologne heavy. "Big night for the Westons," he said. "Try not to make it about you." I pretended not to hear the jab. He'd always been my mother's favorite. The straight-A student, the college athlete, the son who called every Sunday. I had been the stubborn one, the dreamer who became an event planner instead of a lawyer. Guests began to arrive at 6. Old friends from the neighborhood, extended relatives I barely remembered, and my godparents, Alice and Henry, who'd been like a second set of parents to me growing up. They greeted me warmly, Alice hugging me tight. "You look beautiful, Claire. Your mother must be proud," she said. I smiled, but did not answer. The ballroom filled with the sound of laughter, champagne corks popping, and the band playing soft jazz. People gathered in small clusters, swapping stories about my parents' early years. I heard one woman say, "They really are the perfect family," and another reply, 50 years and still going strong. You don't see that anymore." I stood near the bar, sipping sparkling water, and tried to believe that tonight could pass without incident. My father circulated among the tables, shaking hands, telling jokes. My mother held court at the center of the room, her sequined gold dress catching every glint of light. She looked regal, untouchable. When she laughed, People leaned in, eager to be part of the moment. Dinner began at 7. The servers moved efficiently, bringing plates of salad and warm rolls to each table. Conversation flowed easily. My father gave the first speech, thanking everyone for coming and telling a few humorous stories about his early marriage. The room erupted in laughter when he recounted accidentally setting fire to their first Thanksgiving turkey. Michael spoke next, his voice confident. He praised our parents for their example of love and dedication. "You taught us the meaning of family," he said, glancing at me with a faint smirk. "And that loyalty is everything." Guests clapped and my mother beamed. I felt myself relax slightly. Maybe the night would be all polite words and safe memories. I focused on my plate, cutting into the prime rib, listening to the gentle clink of cutlery around the room. Then I saw my mother rise. She placed her napkin on the table, lifted her wine glass, and waited until the chatter faded. 50 years, she began, her voice warm and commanding. A lifetime of love, of challenges overcome, of building a home and raising 2 children. She paused to look at Michael with open affection, one of whom made us proud every single day. A few guests chuckled, assuming it was playful. I knew better. I felt the familiar knot tighten in my stomach. Her eyes turned to me and her smile sharpened. "And to the daughter who never deserved to be born." The words sliced through the air like a blade. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. A woman at the next table gasped. My father stared down at his plate, his hand tightening on the stem of his glass. Michael shifted in his seat, hiding what looked like satisfaction. I kept my face still, the years of practice holding me steady. My heart hammered, but my voice remained silent. In that frozen moment, I realized 2 things. She had just humiliated me in front of nearly everyone I had known since childhood, and I was done letting her get away with it. I placed my fork neatly on my plate, smoothed my dress, and pushed back my chair. Every head turned as I stood. I reached for my glass and met her gaze without flinching. If she wanted a scene, I would give her one, but not the kind she expected. The silence after my mother's words seemed to stretch for miles. The room, moments earlier alive with laughter, now felt like it was holding its breath. I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning and the nervous clink of someone's fork hitting a plate. I stood with my glass in hand, my fingers wrapped tightly around the stem to keep them from shaking. My mother's eyes were locked on mine. Her painted lips curved in the same smile she used when she thought she had won. I felt the weight of 100 pairs of eyes on me, faces I had known my whole life. Neighbors who watched me grow up, distant cousins who sent me birthday cards as a child, family friends who used to invite me over for barbecues. Some of them looked shocked, others looked uncomfortable, unsure whether to side with tradition or decency. I glanced at my father. He still stared at his plate, shoulders rigid, his hand frozen around his wine glass. He'd never stopped her when she decided to make me her target, and I saw no sign that tonight would be different. I scanned the crowd and found Alice, my godmother. She was leaning forward in her chair, her eyes fierce, her lips pressed into a thin line. That small flicker of support steadied me. My brother Michael sat back in his chair, his mouth turned up in a smirk he didn't bother to hide. He was enjoying this. That alone fueled the heat rising in my chest. For years, I had endured moments like this in smaller doses. The quiet jabs at family dinners, the public corrections when she thought I was speaking too boldly, the times she had rewritten my life in front of others to make me seem ungrateful or inadequate. But this was different. This was her planting a flag in front of every important person in our family's life and declaring me unworthy of being here. My first instinct was to swallow my pride, sit down and let the evening continue. That was the script she expected me to follow. But as I looked around the room at the people who would leave tonight thinking her words were truth, something in me shifted. I could feel my heart pounding, but it was not from fear anymore. It was from clarity. If I let this pass, I would be giving her permission to keep writing my story. I had let her do it for 34 years. Tonight, I would take the pen back. I lifted my glass slightly and spoke, my voice calm but firm. "Thank you, Mother," I said, the word landing with a deliberate weight. The room went quieter, as if that were possible. It is a rare gift to be reminded exactly where you stand. Her smile faltered, but only slightly. "Oh, Claire." I'm just being honest, she said, her voice pitched to sound reasonable. You know I've always believed in speaking the truth. I heard a few uncomfortable laughs, the kind that bubble up when people don't know if they're supposed to join the joke or reject it. I set my glass back on the table without drinking from it. I agree. Honesty matters, which is why I think it's time for me to share some of my own. My father's head came up sharply. My brother shifted forward in his chair. My mother narrowed her eyes. Claire, this is not the time, she said. Oh, I think it is, I replied, my voice steady. Years of holding my tongue had built up a reservoir, and I could feel the pressure pushing at the dam. The guests were riveted now. Forks lay untouched on plates. A man I recognized from my father's golf club leaned toward his wife, whispering. Alice gave me the smallest of nods, a silent go on. I took a slow breath and kept my eyes on my mother. You've always made sure people knew your version of our family history, I said. The one where you are the devoted mother and I am the constant disappointment. But there's another version. She scoffed lightly, but I saw the stiffness in her shoulders. The truth is, I continued, I learned more about kindness and loyalty from the people outside this room than I ever did inside my own home. The truth is, there were nights I had a roof over my head because friends took me in after you locked me out. The truth is, love should not have to be earned by being perfect. Murmurs rippled across the tables. Someone dropped a fork. My mother's lips pressed together so tightly they were almost white. This is supposed to be a celebration, she said, her voice shaking now. I am celebrating, I said, just not what you expected. For a moment, we stood there, two women locked in a silent standoff, one holding on to decades of control, the other finally breaking free of it. I could feel the choice hanging in the air, to sit down and let the tension fade or to take this moment all the way to its edge. I looked around the room again. I saw people who had been kind to me, people who had been silent, people who had believed her side without question. I thought about how much of my life I had lived bending to her will so that I would not be cast out of this family. Then I realized I had been cast out long before tonight. I straightened my shoulders. If we are telling truths tonight, then here is mine, I said. I am done pretending this is a family that treats everyone equally. I am done playing the part you wrote for me. The air in the room shifted. People began glancing between my mother and me, waiting for the next strike. My mother's eyes blazed, but she said nothing. I knew she would not back down in public. Neither would I. This was no longer about one cruel toast. It was about reclaiming every piece of dignity I had given away in the name of keeping peace. Tonight, there would be no peace. Tonight, there would be honesty. And I was ready for whatever came next. I stood at the head table, my hands steady now, my voice clear. My mother's stare was fixed on me, sharp and unblinking, as if she could will me back into silence. For most of my life, that look had worked. Tonight, it didn't. In the seconds after my last words, I could feel the room leaning in. People were waiting to see if I would crumble or stand firm. That expectation lit something inside me. I realized I was done speaking in half-truths, done softening my edges so she could keep hers intact. I set my glass down deliberately, the sound a small but decisive break in the silence. My eyes scanned the room. I saw my Uncle James, his brow furrowed as if weighing every word I said. I saw my childhood neighbor, Mrs. Porter, who had once kept me fed when I had nowhere else to go. Her eyes were wet, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. I took a step forward, no longer tethered to my seat at her table. For years, I told myself I could handle the comments, the jabs, the way you rewrote my life in front of other people, I said, looking directly at my mother. But here's what I finally understand. Surviving someone's cruelty does not make it acceptable. Staying silent does not make it untrue. My father cleared his throat, but his voice did not come. His hands shifted in his lap, his gaze flicking between us. I could see the part of him that wanted to diffuse this, to restore the image of harmony, but this was not his battle to end. Michael leaned back, arms folded, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. This isn't the time for whatever this is, he said loudly enough for several tables to hear. I turned to him, meeting his eyes. It's exactly the time, I said, because for 34 years, this family has decided when and where I'm allowed to speak and what I'm allowed to say. That ends now. The room shifted. Some guests looked uncomfortable. Others sat straighter, as if they wanted to see where this was going. I could sense curiosity replacing the shock. I returned my attention to my mother. "I want you to understand something," I said. "I did not come here tonight to start a fight. I came here to celebrate 50 years of marriage, to honor what you and Dad built together. But when you stood up and decided to humiliate me, you opened the door for me to finally speak the truth." Her lips curved into that tight, familiar smile. "Claire, you're overreacting. It was a joke," she said, the word hanging in the air like a challenge. I felt the heat rise in my chest again, but my voice stayed even. "A joke is meant to make people laugh, not bleed." Someone at the far table murmured, "She's right." The comment emboldened me. I took another step forward, my heels clicking softly on the polished floor. "Tonight, I will not shrink so you can stand taller. Tonight, I will not let you decide what my worth is in front of the people who have known me since I was a child. Tonight, I decide who I am." I saw a flicker in her eyes then. Not fear, but uncertainty. She was used to winning these moments because I gave them to her. This time, she was facing a version of me she had never met. The decision formed fully in my mind. I would not let the night end here, with her words hanging in the air like a verdict. I would give the people in that room a choice. I turned to the guests. "I want to make a different kind of toast," I said, lifting my glass again. "To the people who have stood by me when they had nothing to gain. To the friends who opened their doors when I had no home. To the chosen family who has shown me what unconditional love looks like. You are the reason I know what family truly means." A ripple of applause moved through the room, hesitant at first, then stronger. My godmother Alice was the first to stand. My Uncle James followed. A few others exchanged glances and rose to their feet. I set my glass down and straightened. "If anyone else believes love should be unconditional, you're welcome to join me for a real celebration." The words were not shouted, but they carried weight. I stepped away from the head table and began walking toward the doors. The sound of my heels against the marble was steady, sure. Behind me, chairs scraped the floor as people stood. I did not look back to see my mother's reaction. My decision was made. I walked toward the double doors of the banquet hall, my steps echoing against the marble floor. At first, the room was silent except for the rustle of my dress and the soft click of my heels. Then I heard the sound of chairs scraping back. I glanced to my right and saw Alice, my godmother, moving quickly to catch up to me. Henry, her husband, was right behind her. My Uncle James followed, his tall frame cutting through the crowd. A cluster of cousins trailed after them, their expressions a mix of anger and quiet resolve. By the time I reached the doors, I counted more than a dozen people behind me. The chatter in the room was growing, and I could feel the shift in energy. It was no longer just me leaving. It was a visible fracture in the perfect family image my mother had worked so hard to protect. I stopped at the doorway and turned to face the room one last time. "You don't have to pretend," I said, my voice carrying over the low hum of conversation. "If you believe love should not come with conditions, you don't have to sit at a table where it does." There was a pause, and then the movement began again. Two of my father's oldest friends stood up, pushing their chairs in with a quiet finality. A neighbor from my childhood slipped on her coat and joined the group. A couple I recognized from my mother's charity committee exchanged a glance before rising and walking toward the door. Each person who left made the silence at the head table heavier. My father's hands were clasped tightly in front of him. His gaze was fixed somewhere on the tablecloth. My mother sat stiff and unmoving, her glass of wine still in front of her, untouched now. Michael leaned toward her, whispering something, but her eyes never left me. I waited until the last of the 34 guests had joined me. Then I nodded to the group and pushed open the doors. The cool night air met us as we stepped outside. The sound of the band inside was muffled now, replaced by the voices of people talking in hushed but passionate tones. Alice slipped her arm through mine. "You did the right thing," she said quietly. "You've been carrying this for too long." Henry nodded in agreement. "She's had control over the story for decades. Not anymore." We walked together across the parking lot, our breath visible in the night air. Someone suggested we go to the small Italian restaurant a few blocks away. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, and it was ours for the night. By the time we arrived, the owner had pulled tables together to make room for everyone. The atmosphere was the opposite of the banquet hall. No glittering chandeliers, no stiff seating arrangements. Here, the light was soft, the smell of garlic and fresh bread filling the air. People laughed and spoke freely, their voices overlapping in the easy rhythm of genuine connection. I sat between Alice and my cousin Sarah. Plates of pasta and baskets of bread passed from hand to hand. Glasses clinked in toasts that carried no hidden insults, only sincerity. The knot in my stomach that had been there all evening began to loosen. At one point, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my father. I braced myself before opening it. "I am proud of you," it read. No signature, no elaboration, but it was enough to make my throat tighten. I tucked the phone away and chose not to respond just yet. Throughout the night, people shared small memories of moments when they had seen my mother's cruelty, times they had stayed silent because it was easier. There was regret in their voices, but also relief. Speaking the truth had a way of breaking the hold of fear. As the evening wound down, I sat back in my chair and looked around the table. 34 people had chosen to walk away from a celebration built on a false image to stand in a space where honesty mattered more. That was worth more than any formal toast or glittering event could give me. When the bill came, no one let me pay for my meal. "You gave us the gift tonight," Alice said, sliding the check away from me. "The least we can do is cover dinner." We stepped out into the night together, the group breaking off in small clusters to head to their cars. As I walked toward mine, Sarah called out, "Claire, I hope you know this is just the start. You don't have to do any of it alone." Her words followed me as I slid into the driver's seat. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, surrounded by people who chose to be in my life, not bound to me by obligation or expectation. And as I drove away, the image of my mother sitting frozen at that head table replayed in my mind. She had lost control of the room that night, but I had gained something far more valuable. The morning after the anniversary party, my phone was already buzzing when I woke up. Notifications filled the screen. Some from family, some from friends, and several from numbers I didn't recognize. The first message I opened was from my father. It was short, but I could tell every word was deliberate. "I meant what I said last night. I am proud of you." The second was from my cousin Sarah. "People are still talking about what happened. I think you finally made some of them see the truth." Scrolling further, I found a handful of angry texts. One aunt accused me of ruining the celebration. Another relative wrote that I had embarrassed the family name. I read each message carefully, waiting for the sting, but it never came. Their disappointment no longer had the power it once did. On social media, I saw my mother's post from early that morning, a photo from the party, just her and Michael at the head table, with the caption, "A beautiful night celebrating real family." The comments below were filled with praise from her friends. She had not mentioned the 34 empty chairs. I put the phone down and made coffee. The steam rose from the mug as I sat by the window, watching the light shift through the trees. The quiet felt different, not like loneliness, but like space I had made for myself. By mid-afternoon, Alice called. "You changed the narrative last night," she said. "You showed people they can stand up to her. That's bigger than just defending yourself." Later that week, my father asked to meet for lunch. We sat at a small diner halfway between our homes. He stirred his coffee for longer than necessary before speaking. "I should have stopped her years ago," he said, "but I didn't, and I am sorry for that." His voice was steady, but I could see the regret in his eyes. I told him I understood, and that understanding did not erase the hurt. We talked for nearly 2 hours, not about fixing the past, but about how to move forward without repeating it. In the days that followed, I noticed something change in me. I no longer dreaded family gatherings because I no longer felt obligated to attend them. I stopped bracing for the next public jab because I knew I would never stand silently for one again. The people who walked out with me that night became part of a new circle in my life. We met for dinners, celebrated birthdays, and checked in on each other. They were not bound to me by blood, yet they showed up more consistently than most of my relatives ever had. One evening, as I sat with Alice and Henry at their kitchen table, Alice said, "Family is the people who choose you every single day. You have more of them than you realize. That truth settled deep inside me. The night of my parents' anniversary had not been the collapse of a family. It had been the unveiling of what had been broken all along. And in that moment, I had stepped out from under the weight of it. If there was a lesson to carry forward, it was this: silence protects the wrong people. Speaking up may cost you relationships, but it will never cost you your self-respect. I learned that dignity is worth more than keeping the peace. The image of my mother's wine glass shattering on the marble floor will always stay with me. It was the sound of a facade breaking. It was the sound of me taking back my voice. When I think about that night now, I do not see it as the evening I walked away from my family. I see it as the night I walked toward my own freedom, surrounded by the people who were willing to walk beside me. That night taught me something I will never forget. Family is not defined by last names or bloodlines. It is defined by the people who show up, stand beside you, and never make you question your worth. Walking away from that table was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of a life where I get to decide who belongs in it. If this story resonated with you, like the video, share it with someone who might need the reminder, leave a comment to tell me your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful real-life stories. Your support helps these stories reach others who need to hear them.